She called the evening before. No hello, no breath, no hint of courtesy. I'm dropping the kids off tomorrow. You're retired. You don't do anything. That was it. As clipped and transactional as reading off a delivery confirmation. I was standing in the kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, though she'd already ended the call. The window was open a crack, and the breeze was brushing the tops of the pines outside. Inside the house, everything went unnaturally still, as if the air itself held its breath. Even the kettle hadn't finished its slow, rattling boil. It was only my second morning of retirement, and I had imagined something quiet, something gentle. I'd laid out a few weekend brochures on the table, a notebook for the garden sketches I finally had time to make, and the library book I'd left at the halfway mark weeks earlier. The faint sweetness of the cinnamon toast I had made for myself still lingered in the room. Something small and soft, something I'd allowed myself, simply because I finally could. Now it all seemed silly, frivolous, like a life paused mid-sentence. I set the phone on the counter. My hand was steady. It hadn't always then. Years ago, it would tremble whenever I scrambled between double shifts, Jonah's school meetings, and stretching every paycheck to cover piano lessons Valeria later dismissed as pointless. No one had asked if I could handle more back then. They still didn't. Somewhere along the road, it had simply become understood. I am here, so they take. And now that I'd stepped away from the grind of work, they'd quietly nominated me as free labor, invisible, disposable, endlessly available. What stung wasn't her sentence. It was that Jonah had let her be the one to say it, that he hadn't called first, that maybe in his mind, I truly did do nothing now. I scanned the kitchen slowly. A tiny lemon clipping waited on the windowsill, ready to be repotted. The bird feeder needed filling. My life hadn't gone still. But to them, I apparently had. I walked to the drawer by the fridge and pulled out a small pad of paper. Wrote 3 names, Evan Lily Rowan beneath each. I drew 3 blank lines. I didn't yet know what would go on them, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't going to be the one caught unprepared. Morning came earlier than I liked. She didn't knock, just pushed open the door as if the house belonged to her. It was 6:58 a.m. The light outside still a dull grey. I hadn't even poured a cup of coffee yet. The kids trailed behind her like a worn-out little procession. Yvonne, headphones already plugged in. Lily carrying nothing but her phone. And tiny Rowan, dragging a rolling suitcase that thumped aggressively against each step. Valeria dropped a color-coded schedule into my hand. Snacks are labeled. Rowan gets fussy with dairy. Evan skips breakfast. Don't bother. She didn't look at me, just pointed to a clipped stack of emergency contacts and turned to leave. At the door, she added, "Try not to bore them. They're not responsible for your wasted life." And then she was gone, peeling out of the driveway too fast for any neighborhood. The door had barely finished rattling on its hinges when the silence pooled around us. I looked down at the laminated charts in my hands. Meal plans, color codes, schedules. Like some unpaid staff member receiving the morning shift briefing. Behind me, Evan kicked off his shoes in 2 different directions, already untangling his headphone cord. "Wi-Fi?" he asked flatly, eyes never lifting to meet mine. "Good morning," I said. He blinked, almost offended by the greeting. "Wi-Fi," he repeated. I didn't bother answering. I simply walked down the hallway, unplugged the router, wrapped the cord neatly around it, and slid the whole thing behind the vacuum cleaner in the utility closet. Out of sight, out of reach, peaceful. Breakfast was simple, eggs and toast. Lily stared at the plate like it was a personal insult. "Is this what you eat every day?" she asked. "No," I said. Some days I don't eat at all. She didn't know what to do with that, so she just looked away. Rowan dropped his backpack right in the middle of the hallway carpet and flopped onto the couch. Shoes still on, feet pressed into the cushions. It wasn't rebellion, it was habit. The bone-deep kind kids learn by watching adults who never teach them better. By noon, Evan leaned over his plate, barely touched, and muttered under his breath, "Mum says you just want to feel needed." I was rinsing a dish in the sink. I didn't turn. Then she misunderstood, I said. Lunch was grilled cheese and tomato soup. They practically dissected it. Lily peeled the crusts off like she used to when she was 5. Tiny motions of memory she didn't realize she still carried. I noticed. She didn't. By somewhere around 30 minutes in the afternoon, the house went quiet in that particular way. Kids go quiet when they're bored and scanning for weak points. They'd figured out the truth. No Wi-Fi, no Uber Eats, no door-slamming theatrics, no screens humming in every room. Just a house with walls that echoed and a woman who refused to be erased. I sat at the kitchen table planning dinner. Nothing fancy, nothing performative. Something warm, something steady, something real. I wasn't here to entertain anyone, but I wasn't going to vanish for their convenience either. By 7, the house had dimmed into a soft, uneven twilight. The children had retreated to their rooms, each with the dramatic flair of someone staging a gentle protest. Doors half closed, lights low, sighs loud, enough to float into the hallway. I sat alone at the kitchen table, my tea cooling beside my wrist. The walls creaked the way they always did at night, old wood shifting with temperature and time. That sound used to soothe me, remind me I wasn't alone. Tonight it felt different. Not threatening, just reminding me that the space wasn't empty. I was merely being tolerated in it. They hadn't touched dinner. Baked chicken, rice, roasted carrots. Nothing foreign, nothing unusual. Just food meant to feed. Evan said it smelled old. Lily opened a bag of chips. Rowan tried to slip his untouched portion to a dog we didn't own. I cleared the plates in silence. Earlier, I'd tried putting on an old black and white movie. Something soft, nostalgic, familiar. They laughed at it, not the jokes, at the film itself, at the grainy picture, at my taste. Then they laughed at the books on my shelves. Evan ran a finger along the torn spines like he was pointing out flaws in a body. I didn't argue. I'd raised a child already. I knew the futility of fighting with those who weren't actually angry at you, but at the people who shaped them. When the tea grew cold, I poured it down the sink. Walking down the hallway, I heard the murmur of whispered jokes and tapping fingers. They reminded me painfully of Jonah as a little boy, hiding under blankets with a flashlight, drawing comic strips and pretending I couldn't hear him giggle. In the living room, the laptop waited where I'd left it. Thin layer of dust over the keyboard from months of disuse. I opened it. The machine hummed awake slowly, as if shaking off a long nap. I logged into my old social media accounts. Muscle memory guiding my fingers to places I hadn't visited in years. And there she was, Valeria, smiling at the sun in a red bikini top, sunglasses perched above her eyebrows, one hand lazily draped over the thigh of a man I didn't recognize. The background read Arizona. The caption read, "Freedom tastes better with the right company." My breath hitched, just once, then steadied. I looked at the photo long enough to feel my pulse return to its usual rhythm. No jealousy, no surprise, just clarity. A cold, quiet type. I closed the tab, reached for a legal pad, wrote the date, underlined it twice. Not because of panic, not because of spite. If she wanted distance, she would get it. just not the brand she imagined. The next morning arrived wrapped in a different kind of quiet. Not sulking, not heavy, watchful, as if the house itself was waiting to see what shape the day would take. Lily came into the kitchen without her phone for once. She lingered by the counter while I rinsed dishes, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Grandma," she said at last, her voice smaller than the sharp edges she'd worn yesterday. "Did you really not want us here? Mom said you didn't." I turned to face her, drying my hands on a towel. "I never said that." She looked down at her socks, nodded once, and drifted out of the room without another word. Later, Evan approached me more cautiously than usual. He held my laptop, not aggressively, not entitled, but almost nervous. "Can I use it?" he asked. I handed it to him. No lecture, no conditions. I didn't hover, but the microwave door caught reflections like a mirror, and from where I stood, I could see the tabs he'd left open. Valeria's social media, hotel reservations, Phoenix, 2 nights, 2 guests, flight confirmation, text threads with someone named Devon. His messages lined with hearts, hers with photos. Evan stopped breathing normally, somewhere mid-scroll. His eyes froze on one of the images. Then he slammed the tabs shut with a little too much force. "You didn't see that," he muttered. I didn't defend myself or pretend. I simply nodded and walked away, leaving him with the weight of what he'd uncovered. A few hours later, while I was folding towels, Rowan climbed onto the couch beside me. "Is it true you made Dad cry once?" he asked, swinging his legs. I blinked, then smiled gently. "No, but I think he's cried alone more times than people know." Rowan nodded thoughtfully, picked up a towel, and did his best to fold it, corner to corner, proud of the sloppy triangle he created. Dinner that night was soup and warm cornbread. Evan stirred the pot without being asked. Lily laid out the forks and napkins. Rowan didn't drop a single thing. They weren't suddenly affectionate. They didn't call me grandma with softness, but something had shifted. Their silence wasn't hostile now, just cautious. Opening, but afraid to be the first to say so. When they went to bed, I wrote down everything I remembered from the screens earlier. Not to weaponize it, not to use against Valeria, but because I'd lived long enough to know the price of forgetting the wrong details. Just after lunch the next day, Evan appeared in front of me again. This time his shoulders were drawn tight, and a tablet was clutched to his chest, as if shielding himself from his own discovery. "I think you should read this," he whispered. I took it carefully. The display lit up to a group chat labeled Escape Plan. Valeria's messages lined up in bold, unapologetic rows. "Taking the kids with me. Jonah won't fight back. He never does. She's old. She'll fold." The words landed like ice in a glass, sharp, loud, and predictable. Evan waited for shouting, for something dramatic, but I didn't react that way. Instead, I tapped into another folder. Photos. Suitcases shoved into a car trunk I didn't recognize. Favorite toys stuffed into plastic bags. Everything planned. Not a single line mentioning Jonah. Just extraction. Evan swallowed. "Are we in trouble?" "No," I said calmly. "But someone is about to be very surprised." I set the tablet down, walked to my desk drawer, and pulled out my old accounting supplies. Paper, ink, date stamps I hadn't used in years. Then I printed every file, sorted each page, labeled them neatly with times and timestamps. My hands steady, my pulse unbothered. By the time Lily wandered into the dining room, the table looked like a quiet war room. Organized, methodical, inevitable. "What's all that?" she asked. "Just things your mother didn't bother to delete." She didn't ask anything else. Children always feel when truth is shifting under their feet. That evening, when the kids settled on the couch with a movie, I stepped onto the porch. The air was cool, carrying that faint scent of dry leaves and the promise of a quiet night. I dialed a single number, one I hadn't used in years, a small accounting office downtown. People who still remembered me from the seasons when I balanced their books, during tax frenzies and deadline scrambles. I need some help, I said, and I need it handled quietly. They didn't press for explanations, only asked when. I turned to look through the screen door. Evan, Lily, and Rowan sat close together, closer than they dared sit all week. A cluster of silhouettes leaning in toward the same patch of light. Tomorrow, I said, I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth with a spine. Something that stood on its own. Undeniable. Routine settled in over the next few days. Not forced, not rigid. More like a rhythm I offered and they gradually stepped into. Breakfast at 8. A short list of chores penciled onto the fridge door. Reading at 10. Walks before dinner. By the third day, no one protested. Rowan asked if he could butter the pan for the grilled cheese. He burned the first slice, but his smile was enormous. Lily took over the laundry without being asked. Her folds were crooked, oddly shaped, but careful. Small origami versions of shirts. Evan lingered near me while I worked on the grocery list. He asked about unit prices, why some items stretched further, why others weren't worth the extra money. He listened, really listened, not with politeness, with intention. They weren't affectionate yet, but they were paying attention. That evening the phone rang. Jonah. Hey, Mom, he said, voice tight, tired. She said it was a work conference, somewhere out west. I didn't press her too much. His exhale was long and thin, as if he was choosing every word with care. Thanks for taking them, he added. I let the silence linger, not angry, just long enough to see whether he'd fill it. He didn't. They're asking hard questions, Jonah, I said softly. About you, about her. Yeah, he murmured. I figured. Silence again. Then I'll come by this week, he said. See them. I didn't mention the chat logs. I didn't mention the printed folder tucked into the drawer with old birthday cards he'd made when he was 5. Lopsided hearts, glitter falling off the glue. I wanted him to walk into the house and feel what I'd seen. 3 children adjusting, growing calmer in a space that wasn't demanding anything from them, but presence. When the call ended, I stood by the window watching the porch light flicker in the wind. The grocery list sat on the table. Evan's handwriting nestled under mine. Whatever Jonah expected to find when he came, one thing was certain. He would find something real. He arrived a little after 6 on Thursday. The sun hung low behind him, turning his outline into a quiet silhouette. His shoulders sagged in a way that made it clear the week had folded him in half. He barely stepped inside before the kids swarmed him. Rowan barreled forward, shouting, "Dad!" and wrapped himself around Jonah's torso. Lily pressed herself into his side. Even Evan lingered close, hovering but not distant. Jonah blinked, stunned. They're calmer here, he said, hand resting on Rowan's back. They're different, I nodded. Then I went to the cabinet, retrieved the folder and placed it on the table beside him. No explanations, no warnings, just the truth, waiting patiently. Jonah hesitated before touching the folder, as if afraid of what it might contain. But curiosity, or perhaps instinct, nudged him forward. He opened it. The room seemed to still around him. His eyes moved across the pages, slowly at first, then with a growing, horrified clarity. Screenshot after screenshot, Printed messages, plans outlined with chilling confidence, suitcases packed, a car trunk loaded, a departure itinerary with no mention of him, texts to Devon, hearts dotting the margins of their conversations. Then, the page I'd marked in red. Jonah's too checked out to notice. I'll handle the rest. His fingers stopped mid-turn. I didn't know, he whispered. The words barely made it past his lips. She said I was ruining them, that they needed a break from me, that I'd fall apart if she left. He didn't cry. Not in the dramatic sense, but something in his face cracked, like a veneer left too long in the sun. The kids had gathered in a loose semicircle behind him, confused, quiet, watching. Lily was the first to move. She reached for his hand. "Can we stay here, Dad?" she asked softly. Jonah didn't answer with words. He just pulled her close, then pulled Rowan in, then nodded for Ovan, who stepped forward without hesitation. I didn't interrupt, didn't explain, didn't offer comfort. He didn't need comfort. He needed a mirror, and the moment he looked into it, he finally saw what had been happening to all of them. Not just through her actions, but through his own silence. He stayed 2 nights. No one asked him to. He slept in the guest room, folded his towels, washed his plate, helped put the kids to bed. Something had shifted, not just between us, but within him. The kids shifted too, slowly, cautiously, like animals approaching water for the first time in days. Evan hovered near Jonah at breakfast, offering to crack eggs. Lily left a novel on his nightstand. Rowan waited for him to finish brushing his teeth before climbing into bed beside him that first night. By the second morning, Jonah and the kids were making pancakes together as if it were a ritual they had always known. Jonah fumbled with the spatula at first, then surrendered to the rhythm, measuring flour, wiping spills, letting Rowan drench his plate in syrup until it nearly sloshed over. "How long have I been missing this?" he murmured, not expecting an answer. I didn't give one. Later that afternoon, we drove into town. He filed for temporary custody, the kind that freezes everything before someone can run. Enough to stall any plans Valeria had set in motion. He closed their joint account, opened a new one in his name, let his attorney handle the rest. "I should have done this years ago," he said quietly, as he drove us home, his eyes fixed on the road as though afraid to blink. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I showed him her latest post. Not to twist the knife, but to remove any last shadow of doubt he might be clinging to. Valeria, lounging by a pool, glass raised, leaning into the same man from the hotel receipts. Caption: "Starting over." Finally, Jonah looked at the screen long enough for something inside him to release. Then he handed the phone back without a word. No anger, no shock, just the sound of something settling. He didn't need my interpretation. He'd already turned toward someone solid. A few hours later, standing in the doorway, Jonah asked if he could take the kids home in a few days. Not back to that house. He meant a small apartment near his work. "They're calmer now," he said. "I don't want to lose that." He wouldn't. Not this time. She didn't text. She didn't call. She simply walked in several days later, as if she'd never been gone. As if nothing in the world had shifted in her absence. "I'm here for my kids," Valeria announced, dropping her bag by the door the same way someone might toss their coat onto a familiar chair. The confidence in her posture suggested she still believed the house, and everyone in it, revolved around her orbit. Then she saw Jonah, and beside him Alan, his attorney, sitting calmly in an armchair with a leather folder resting on his knee. Valeria froze mid-step. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharpening. Oh, we're filing for temporary custody, Jonah said, steady, composed in a way I had rarely seen from him. Emergency status, effective immediately. She barked a laugh, short and dismissive. You think she is better than me? Her chin jerked toward me, as if I were a piece of old furniture cluttering the room. Jonah didn't turn my way. He didn't need to. She already is, he replied simply. From the hallway, I saw the faintest movement. A row of toes peeking out from behind the wall. The children, watching silently, leaning into one another. Valeria's eyes landed on the folder on the table, the one Jonah had carried with him to the courthouse, the one filled with everything she thought she'd hidden. Her smirk wavered, the mask slipped. You went through my accounts, she snapped. No, Jonah said, not blinking. You left everything in plain sight. She flipped through the pages, screenshots, reservations, messages, each one tightening the line of her mouth. Every sheet another unraveling thread. This won't hold up, she hissed. No, you think this makes you a better parent? Jonah's reply wasn't loud, wasn't heated. No, he said, but I'm finally being one. Silence spread across the room like smoke. For a moment, I thought she might lunge toward the hallway, toward the children, as if expecting them to run into her arms, to cry for her, to defend her. They didn't move, not one of them. A flicker of something, panic or realization, passed across her face. She straightened her spine, grabbed her bag, and lifted her chin with practiced defiance. But her silence as she walked out the door was unlike any silence she had ever worn. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't smug. It was hollow, and she knew it. The front door clicked shut behind her. That was all. No screaming. No dramatic exit. No thrown insults. Just the sound of a departure that meant more than any words she could have hurled on her way out. And as soon as the echo faded, the house felt different, fuller, anchored, breathing properly for the first time in years. It wasn't that she'd taken something with her. It was that she'd removed the chokehold she never realized she had placed on everyone inside. The weeks that followed moved the way water does. Quietly, steadily, reshaping everything in small, unhurried currents. No chaos, no slammed doors, just daily life, settling into a shape it should have had all along. The legal parts carried themselves forward like a separate tide. The lawyers handled the filings, the motions, the notifications. Jonah met with them twice a week, sometimes more. Custody requests, financial boundaries, address changes, untangling what had been knotted for years. Each meeting loosened another thread from the life he used to defend without question. But inside the house, things softened. There was noise again, but it was the kind that warmed the walls rather than strained them. The gentle clatter of breakfast dishes, sneakers thudding on the stairs, Rowan's laughter in the backyard as he tried to teach the neighbor's dog a trick he invented on the spot. Something involving a stick, 3 spins, and a very patient dog. Jonah stayed. He didn't make a speech about it. He just stopped packing his bag, stopped mentioning the apartment he was supposed to tour, stopped acting like his presence needed an excuse. The kids unpacked in stages too, like animals testing new territory. A toothbrush on the bathroom counter, a book left open on the couch, a jacket hung up instead of tossed on the stairs. Their questions shifted too, less defensive, less afraid. One Saturday, we planted basil and tomatoes in the garden patch near the shed. I handed each of them a small spade, expecting groans or complaints. None came. They dug the soil, pressed it down gently, watered the earth with the soft concentration of children caring for something fragile. Rowan asked if plants get lonely. Evan wanted to know why tomato vines twist as they grow. Lily took picture after picture, quiet and intent, as if she finally believed this was a moment worth keeping. That evening, the air was mild, and the mosquitoes hadn't yet found their courage. After the kids fell asleep, Jonah stepped onto the porch and sat beside me. He didn't speak for a long time. Didn't need to. The night hummed around us. Crickets, rustling branches, the faint buzz of a distant street lamp. Finally, he said, "She convinced me you were the problem." He didn't look at me. He looked out into the dark yard. "She said your silence meant guilt. She told me stepping away was safer than stepping in." His voice was low, worn from years of swallowing words he should have spoken sooner. I didn't cut in. I didn't soften the moment for him. I simply stared ahead and said, "Silence is only useful until it starts protecting the wrong person." He let out a slow breath, one that sounded like he'd been holding it a long time. We stayed like that, side by side, watching the porch light flicker and draw small moths toward its glow. The kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not lonely quiet, shared quiet, earned quiet. "Thank you," he whispered finally, "for not giving up on us." I didn't smile at him. I smiled at the soft glow of the upstairs windows. 3 children sleeping safely in rooms that finally felt like theirs again. Because when someone tries to erase you, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay rooted until the whole house grows around your presence. The night settled around us like a soft blanket, and Jonah eventually went back inside, leaving me alone with the porch light and the hum of distant traffic. Upstairs, the warm glow seeped from the kids' rooms, proof of life slowly stitching themselves back together. I stayed outside a while longer, listening to the quiet, not the empty kind, the living kind. Inside, everyone slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. And as I sat there, I realized something simple and impossible to ignore. Sometimes survival is not a dramatic act. Sometimes it's a slow cultivation. The steady work of outlasting the storm until the house grows roots around you.